I, 35F, think I'm falling for one of my students, 22M, and I don't know what to do. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this. For the past 12 years, I've been a dedicated professor at a well-known university. Teaching has always been more than just a job to me. It's my passion, my calling. I've always believed in keeping a clear line between my personal and professional life, especially when it comes to my students. But now, for the first time, I find myself struggling with feelings that I know I shouldn't have, and I don't know what to do. This semester, I have a student, let's call him Jake, who's 22 years old. From the very first class, he stood out to me, but not in the way I'm used to. Jake isn't just a typical student who shows up, does the work, and leaves. He's intelligent, curious, and incredibly insightful. He's the kind of student who asks questions that make you think, who challenges your perspective in a way that's invigorating. Over the years, I've had plenty of bright students, but there was something different about Jake, something that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Initially, I told myself that my interest in him was purely academic. After all, I'm a professor. It's my job to be interested in my students' intellectual growth. But as the weeks went by, I started to realize that my thoughts about Jake were straying far from the classroom. Jake often stays after class to discuss the material with me. At first, our conversations were strictly about the course, dissecting theories, debating interpretations, things like that. But gradually, those conversations started to shift. We began talking about more personal topics, our favorite books, our views on life, even our hopes and dreams. We bonded over our mutual love for literature, especially works that explore the complexities of human relationships. I started looking forward to these conversations more than I should, and I began to notice how my heart would race just a little when he was around. There was one day, in particular, that stands out to me. It was after class, and Jake asked if we could grab a coffee to continue our discussion on a book we were both passionate about. I agreed, thinking it would be just another academic conversation. But it wasn't. As we sat in the coffee shop, the atmosphere between us shifted. We talked about the book, sure, but then the conversation veered into more personal territory. Jake told me about his upbringing, his struggles, and his aspirations. He was open and vulnerable in a way that I hadn't seen before, and it made me feel closer to him than I'd ever felt to any student, or colleague for that matter. As he spoke, I found myself drawn to him not just as a professor, but as a woman. I noticed the way his eyes lit up when he talked about something he was passionate about, the way his smile seemed to brighten the room. I was struck by his maturity, his depth, and the way he seemed wise beyond his years. And it scared me? I've always been careful to maintain professional boundaries. My students are off limits, period. I've seen what can happen when those lines get blurred, and it never ends well. But with Jake, I feel like I'm on the edge of something I can't control. I've started thinking about him outside of class, wondering what he's doing, if he's thinking about me too. I even caught myself daydreaming about what it would be like to be with him in a more personal way, and that thought terrifies me. I know that this could be incredibly inappropriate. I'm his professor, and there's a power dynamic at play here that I can't ignore. If I were to act on these feelings, it could ruin my career, not to mention the impact it could have on Jake. I could jeopardize his education, his future, and that's something I would never forgive myself for. But at the same time, I can't help but wonder, what if this is something real? What if we have a genuine connection that's worth exploring? He's an adult, and I'm not exactly old enough to be his mother. The age gap is significant, yes, but it's not insurmountable, is it? Then again, I keep asking myself, is it just the idea of him, or is it actually him? I'm at a point in my life where I've been through enough to know that infatuation can be misleading. But with Jake, it feels different. It feels deeper, more substantial, and that's what's throwing me off. If it were just a crush, I could dismiss it, get over it, move on. But these feelings are lingering, growing stronger every day, and I'm not sure what to do about them. I've tried to put some distance between us, hoping that time and space would make these feelings fade. But it hasn't worked. If anything, it's made me realize how much I enjoy being around him, how much I value our conversations. It's become clear to me that this isn't just going to go away on its own, and I need to figure out how to handle it before I make a mistake that I'll regret for the rest of my life. I've considered the possibility of talking to Jake about this, but every time I think about it, I get cold feet. What would I even say? Hey, I think I might be falling for you, but I'm your professor, so this is complicated? It sounds ridiculous, and I'm terrified of how he might react. What if he's completely unaware of how I'm feeling, and I end up making things awkward between us? Or worse, what if he feels the same way and we both end up crossing a line we can't uncross? Then there's the question of ethics. I've always prided myself on being a professional, on doing what's right, even when it's hard. And I know that getting involved with a student, no matter the circumstances, is ethically questionable at best. But at the same time, I can't ignore the fact that Jake is an adult, capable of making his own decisions. If this were any other situation, if he weren't my student, wouldn't it be okay to explore these feelings? Wouldn't it be worth seeing where this connection could lead? But he is my student, and that changes everything. I keep coming back to the fact that I have a responsibility to him, not just as his professor, but as someone who's supposed to be a role model. someone who's supposed to guide him academically and help him succeed. If I let my personal feelings get in the way of that, I could be failing him in the worst way possible. I've thought about seeking advice from a colleague, but I'm too scared of the judgment. What if they think I'm unfit to teach? What if they report me to the administration, even though I haven't done anything wrong yet? And then there's the fear that they might not take me seriously, that they'll just brush it off as a midlife crisis or something. But this doesn't feel like that. This feels real, and it's consuming me. So here I am, turning to Reddit for advice because I don't know where else to go. I'm torn between my feelings for Jake and my professional responsibilities. Part of me wants to just ignore these feelings, keep things strictly professional, and hope that they fade over time. But another part of me wonders if that's the right thing to do. What if this is a once-in-a-lifetime connection, and I'm letting it slip away because I'm too scared to take a chance? I know this situation is complicated, and there's no easy answer, but I need to make a decision before I do something that I can't take back. Should I distance myself from Jake and focus on maintaining a strictly professional relationship, even if it means ignoring what feels like a genuine connection? Or should I consider the possibility that this could be something more, and find a way to navigate it without crossing any ethical lines? TLDRR. I'm a 35-year-old professor, and I think I'm falling for one of my 22-year-old students. I'm struggling to balance my professional responsibilities with what feels like a real connection. I need advice on whether to distance myself or explore the possibility of something more. Update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the feedback. It was eye-opening, to say the least. I've got an update, and things have definitely taken an unexpected turn. After my original post, I decided to put some distance between Jake and me. I stuck to the plan, keeping things strictly professional, avoiding one-on-one conversations, and focusing on my role as his professor. I thought I was doing the right thing, and for a while, it seemed like everything was under control. But then, a couple of weeks ago, something happened that I didn't see coming. It was after class, and Jake asked to speak with me privately. My guard was up, but I agreed, thinking it would be another academic question, or maybe something about his final paper. But when we got to my office, he completely blindsided me. Jake admitted that he's been feeling a connection between us two, and he's been struggling with it for a while. He told me he didn't want to make things awkward, but that he couldn't keep pretending nothing was going on. He said he respects me as a professor, but there's something more there, and he couldn't ignore it anymore. Honestly, I was shocked. I thought I was the only one wrestling with these feelings. In that moment, I felt a rush of emotions, relief that I wasn't alone in this, fear of what could happen next, and a strong, undeniable pull toward him. I won't lie, for a split second I thought about giving in. I thought about what it would be like to cross that line, to see where this could lead. But then reality hit me like a ton of bricks. I told Jake that I understood where he was coming from, but that we couldn't go down this path. I reminded him of the power dynamics, the risks to both our futures, and the fact that I'm still his professor. He looked disappointed, but he nodded and said he understood. That should have been the end of it, but the tension between us was palpable. After that conversation, things between us got complicated. I noticed Jake was more distant in class, but there was this unspoken tension whenever we made eye contact. It was like we both knew what we wanted but were trying desperately to pretend otherwise. It didn't help that he started showing up in places I frequent outside of school. Coincidentally, I'm sure, but it still threw me off balance. Last week, things escalated further. We were both at a university event, and after a few drinks, too many, honestly, we found ourselves alone together. The tension was unbearable, and we ended up talking about what had happened in my office. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, we were dangerously close to crossing that line I'd sworn I wouldn't cross. I wish I could say I stayed strong, but the truth is, we kissed. It was brief, but it was enough to break through the wall I'd been trying to build between us. The moment it happened, I felt a surge of guilt and panic. We pulled away from each other almost immediately, realizing the mistake we were making. Jake apologized, and I could see the regret in his eyes, mirroring my own. Since then, I've been a mess of emotions. Part of me feels like I've already failed as a professor, that I've let things go too far. The other part of me can't stop thinking about that kiss, wondering what could have happened if we hadn't stopped ourselves. I know how wrong it is, and yet, it's all I can think about. I've decided to take a leave of absence for the rest of the semester. I need some space to clear my head and figure out how to move forward without further damaging my career or Jake's future. I've informed the department head that I'm dealing with some personal issues, and they've arranged for another professor to take over my classes. They don't know the real reason, of course, and I plan to keep it that way. I know this isn't the clean resolution most of you were hoping for, and trust me, I wish I had handled things differently. But this is where I'm at right now, caught between what I know is right and what I can't seem to let go of. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I need to get a grip on this before it spirals even further out of control. Thanks again for all the advice. I clearly have a lot of work to do on myself, and I appreciate the tough love. I'll update again if anything changes, but for now, I'm just trying to navigate this mess I've gotten myself into.